So welcome to another edition of Talk About Black. What happens when you lose your way? How does it happen? Why does it happen? But more importantly, how do you find your way back? Well, we're going to be talking to two extraordinary individuals today, Carl Hart and Noel Williams. And thank you so much, guys, for joining us. Maybe just, Carl, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, a bit about your story, and then we'll get into it.
So I'm into property, own a property group, Gorilla Group is the name of the company. So we do developments, land developments, with brokerage and also a facilities management company. So I'm into business now, and it is tough, in all honesty, especially from the background where I've come from. Now I look at it retrospectively, I've always been into business, but the sort of business I was into previously wasn't exactly your legal sort of business. So growing up as a kid, was born here in London, went back to Nigeria and came back to London in early 2000. We lived in London for a little while and then moved to Birmingham, where I grew up, went to college in Birmingham. And education wasn't for me. You know, coming from an African background, you either do engineering, law, or medicine. If not, there's no point in you really being alive. So I wasn't really the academic type. So I was always the class clown, getting in trouble in school all the time, and just about made it into college, and I dropped out. And kind of got into the wrong sort of crowd, the wrong kind of guys, purely because we were bored. Got into crime, got on the streets and getting up to no good, had a few run-ins with the police. And before I kind of knew it, things kind of escalated and we started, running an enterprise, some illegal enterprise, and kind of scaled up over the years. So from 2007 up to 2011, I was out on the streets and just kind of doing fraud and getting up to no good, and inevitably the law caught up with me, and I found myself sitting in a prison cell thinking, how the hell did I get here? So it gave me a lot of time to kind of look back and think of, the decisions and why those decisions were made to kind of land me in that position.
Well, we're going to break it down a little bit and find out. I'd love to hear a little bit about how it actually happened. How did it all unfold those early years? But thank you. Noel, tell us a little bit about your background, the early years, please.
First of all, thank you very much, Giles, for inviting me on to have this discussion,
Great.
which I'm sure is going to be a very, very good discussion. My early years are quite similar to Carl. I started living in a social housing with my brother, my mother, and my dad. And I come from a family of generational crime, to be honest. My mother and my dad have both been to prison themselves for various things. So kind of grew up in a household where crime wasn't, allowed. We're not happy that people are out here committing crime and that's going on, but at the same time, I had a lot of adverse childhood effects that kind of affected my life. And at the end of the day, the environment I grew up in was very, very harsh. I grew up in a gang from the age of 11. We were out on the street doing things that we shouldn't have. I was kicked out of school in year 7. I was in prison by the time I was 13 years old for 5 years. So going forward, I didn't have much other sort of things that I knew at the time, apart from being around boisterous boys who kind of went out and committed crime. Listen, at the end of the day, when you commit crime, you've got to hold your hands up, but there was a lot of young men who had tortured and terrible stories and not good beginnings as to why we actually came to the point we did. By the age of 18, I'd gone back to prison again. That was my second sentence. So by that time, I'd already served over 5 years of my life in prison. And I could just about read and write by that time. So, climbing the social mobility ladder was not really what I was going to be doing, hence to where I am now, but we'll stick to the early years and we'll get to where I am a bit later.
And then we'll get into it. So why don't we maybe, Carl, tell us a little bit about what happens, the attitude, mental attitude. You're a young black guy, you're in Birmingham, and you find yourself, as you said, in crime. But just break that down for us a little bit, just so that we can understand what happens.
I mean, with just going back to where I was in college, I kind of grew up in an environment where I thought basketball was my dream, it was my life. So the ambition was to go and make it and get into the NBA and, get on TV, and live the dream. So I was really driven by sports. And I was of the mindset that the only way to kind of achieve success was either through sports or through crime. I wasn't an MC. I couldn't pick up a mic and put words together. Some of the guys could do. So for me, it was that. And I didn't have anyone who I deemed successful out of either sports or crime or in music.
But those were, if you like, that was the paradigm you were in. It was either going to be sport or it was going to be crime.
It was, absolutely.
From an early age, I mean.
From a very early age, because that's all I was exposed to. That's all my friends spoke about. That's all we watched on TV.
So what role models did you have? You're 12 years old.
I didn't really have any at that stage. My mom's always been into business. Yeah. She's always ran small businesses. So that was my sort of early introduction to what business was like, but I had no interest in it because my mom traveled quite a lot. Yeah. She ran an import and export business, so she was, in the country or out. My dad was a vicar, so I at a church, so I didn't see.
So you go to church on a Sunday doing some of this stuff on
a Monday? Crazy, huh? I know.
No, I mean, for you, the idea of a role model, what did you have when you were 12, 13? By 12 it had already was going.
Yeah, I didn't have a role model as such, unfortunately. But I lucky enough that I'd met a lovely woman on my path called Tina Morgan, who when I was locked up in custody in a secure unit in Bristol, called Vinnie Green, and she taught me how to read and write, which is integral for the position that I am in now, and which was more integral because she was a white woman who really took in the young black kid from London, that sort of social thing that, we don't mess with those kids, they're yobs, they're thugs, and she's from a different part of society.
What did she see in you? What was it you think that she saw?
Well, luckily she saw a lot of promise, as she always says to me, and the value that I could make in my own community and the impact that I could actually possibly have. I think what was unfortunate for me is when you grow up in a situation where generational crime's happening and things, the normality is just to let people run their course, and if he gets involved in crime, so be it. If he doesn't, so be it. And when I was younger, it was a big focus on education, so I was quite happy that I learned how to read and write. Yeah. So she was definitely a superhero for me at that age, but I didn't have anyone that was a role model apart from probably a footballer or two, but I was never going to be a footballer.
Yeah. So what is it like to be in prison?
Well, it depends, I think. I think it's different for everybody. I think everyone has a different experience, and I'd unfortunately been gone to prison from the age of 12 up until 22, so I've been to every form of prison we have in this country, which is secure unit, secure training centre, young offenders institution, and then Her Majesty's prison. And nothing's like Her Majesty's prison. It's horrible, it's squalid conditions, it's slightly inhumane the way they've got people living, locking people up like, I wouldn't like to say like animals, because I think that's a bit aggressive and a bit harsh, and of course you've got to have some form of control. But locking people up to the point 18 hours a day, no education to do, these things are never going to send somebody down the best path when they're coming out. So, and there's a lot of violence going on as well, and bullying. So if you ask me, prisons are not the best place to be, and I know a lot of people think people are running around playing PlayStation, but if they also had other things to do in there, and it would equip people to come out and live lives and actually impact society in a better way.
Yeah, and Carl, your experience, how would you describe prison? Someone says, what's prison like?
Prison is, current prison in the UK and probably across the world as well is totally contrary to actually what prison is for, which is reform it. As Noel rightly said, they don't have any sort of rehabilitation program for people to actually change their perspective and their mindset and their wrong ways. It's pretty much just get behind your door and you come out if there's staff around. There's a lot of bullying, there's a lot of drugs. And my understanding of prison is, or do I see prison, it's a networking event. It's a place where, as business people, we go to networking events and we meet people where we can do joint ventures and stuff. But prison is the same. You go in there and you meet people that you can get involved with and scale up your enterprise or whatever the case might be. And I'm speaking from personal experience. I remember, unfortunately, I've been to prison 4 times. My first holiday away was for driving whilst disqualified. So I went in as a disqualified driver and I came out as a fraudster purely because of a guy that I met in there and kind of started talking to me and somewhat grooming me And when I got out, he gave me contact details for people that can, meet out on the out and get resources from to pull resources together and make stuff happen. So my understanding of prison, it's not really the best solution at times for certain individuals. Don't get me wrong, there are some people who deserve to go away because they are a nuisance and a threat to society. But they don't do what prison is supposed to be actually doing for people at all.
Let's talk about last Friday, because the three of us found ourselves in Swellside Prison.
Yeah.
We spent an extraordinary 4 hours with some people doing life sentences for some pretty serious crimes. But it was an extraordinary afternoon, I thought, in terms of an insight into the way prisons run, into the people in there, into their mindset.
Yeah.
You gave an extraordinary talk while you were in there. Maybe just give us a little sense of what it was that you'd said to them. I mean, bear in mind, how many of them were sitting?
About 15, 16
16
guys.
of these guys, right? Yeah. And they're looking at you. Some of these guys are serving between 20 years and one guy, I think, was
37
years. And these are young.
40,
these are young guys,
yeah,
right?
young guys.
Young guys. I mean, give us a sense of what you talked about.
The talk I gave to these guys was to really bring hope to them. Because whilst you're sitting in that sort of environment, that's pretty much the only thing that you have to keep you going. Your mind plays a lot of tricks on you. People that you thought cared about you and were down for you kind of just disappear. So I was just giving my story of how I managed to pull myself out of that, which was I found myself in Lindholm. Lindholm is a prison up in Doncaster, which is a working prison. My job at the time was to be the bin collector, so I'll go around the prisons picking up bins. And for the first time in my life, that's where I had to take responsibility. I found myself I remember it as clear as day. It was a spring morning, sitting on the grass outside the waste management facility, they call it, and thinking, how the hell is this my reality? How have I come to a position where I've lost my freedom? My family doesn't want to know me because I've brought so much shame to them. All my friends who I thought were my brothers have kind of disappeared, and I'm in prison picking up bins. And for the first time in my life, I felt the next thing worse than that was just for me to die, in all honesty. And
you got to that point?
I got to that point, and that was my rock bottom, absolute rock bottom. I was definitely in depression. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was depressed because I didn't come out my cell or integrate with the prison society for about 3 months.
From when you arrived?
Yeah, from when I arrived.
What happened? You just basically were just.
I was taken aback by that whole experience. That was my longest sentence then. So it was really hard to come to terms with.
The cell door shut and you realized that I'm here now.
Absolutely. This is some serious stuff. And I was in one of the worst prisons in the country. This is, the people you see on the newspapers and on TV for getting up to various atrocities. These are the same guys that you're in the gym with. These are the guys that you're eating and sharing a plate with and all of that stuff. So it's the real stuff. And that's where it really hit me. And I remember sitting outside, and I honestly believe that's where I heard God meet me. And I heard a voice, I don't know where it came from, but it was very clear to me saying, Carl, I've given you so much gifts and talents, and you're putting it to waste. There is more in you. That you're here to add value to society and not be a nuisance. And in that moment, that's where I had a massive paradigm shift. And I made a decision that everything about me from that moment on was going to be totally transformational. I wasn't going to think the same. I wasn't going to dress or speak or have the same level of friends. Everything about me was going to change. And up to that point, the only book I ever read in my life was Oliver Twist, and this was back in Nigeria. And I just I changed my perspective to start investing time in prison rather than spending time in jail. So I started reading a hell of a lot. Started reading a whole bunch of books on personal development, business. I even started reading the dictionary just to gain as much knowledge, because I just didn't want to let 2 years of my life go by and I couldn't account for it. It was just a decision that I was just not happy with at all. So I really started putting in work, got in the gym, lifting weights and just becoming healthy, started changing my diet, and just spent the majority of my time just binging on books and getting knowledge. So that's where that transformation came for me. But one of the challenge was that environment is so negative. Everything about the prison environment is negative. So it's so, imagine trying to maintain or keep a positive mindset when you're in the midst of negativity. And I'm saying the prison, the screws are negative, the guys in there are negative. There was this one particular guy who was, his goal in life was to make my life hell.
You specifically?
Yeah, me specifically. I mean, he did so many different sort of tricks, and that's why I learned self-control the most. I had to really control myself not to actually get into any altercation with him, because I thought it's bad enough that I'm here. I don't need to make any further decisions to make my time whilst I'm here any worse than it is. So the level of self-control I had to exercise, you know, and develop my mind to really block out the noise, you know, that was happening around me. Came from me being in that position, and I've taken those disciplines and I'm applying them in my life today, and it's making a lot of difference. So when I look back at it, I'm really grateful and thankful for those experiences. But at the same time, I had to kind of get myself out of there, and what kept me going was just visualizing.
This was your message that you gave to the guys on Friday?
Yeah, it was just just visualizing what life could be like.
Yeah. What did you see? What did you visualize? What was it that you...
I was seeing myself at my optimum in business, you know, being around successful people, world leaders, real influencers.
So despite the fact you're in prison, you're thinking...
Absolutely. They had my body, but they didn't have my mind at all. In no way, shape or form did they have my mind.
Yeah.
I mentally wasn't present in those gates at all.
Yeah, well, you communicated that on Friday, but Noel, we'll come back to that, because it's hugely powerful. But Noel, I thought, what you said to Richard, the prison officer, about his award that he'd received and why he received it, that was incredibly moving. Just recount for us what it was that you'd said.
Yes, we're very lucky to be able to even go into HMP Swellside, and really want to thank the governor there and an officer called Richard Davis, who Lord Michael Hastings is you know, the main man as to why we are going in there, and along with Kenny Amaphrodon, because Kenny's got a young friend in there, and you know, he met him with Lord Michael Hastings, and they sat down, they had a visit, and they really wanted to get men together so that they could actually find some form of hope in this group that we have gone to visit on a few occasions. And I'm so happy that Carl was allowed to come and bless them as well, and so was yourself.
Yeah, no, it was great.
It's a remarkable occasion, as you can both testify to yourselves. And there's a group of 33 of them at maximum, so we only got to see a share of them because, as you say, the prison system is such that people can't come out because there's not enough staff. But when they are at their maximum, there are 33 of them, which was the time before. I did say to them that I'm going to nominate Richard Davis for this award, and the reason is because, one, it's in Kent, so politically it's not one of those areas where young black kids are turning up out. We don't live there. There is no demographic. It just happens to be the prisons there. I think it's 70+% of that prison is predominantly black people. And we're talking about young people. When we talk about knife crime and talk about all these things that we're seeing on the news, the other side of it actually is what you just said. Where is the human element, and where is the rehabilitation? Who is working on the other side to make sure that these people do not return to the community looking to do the same sort of things? It was Richard. You know, all those young men were testifying to how great and how much of an authority he is, how much they can rely on him. And he's the sort of man that literally worked a shift on Saturday, and because we were coming on Sunday, it wasn't his day, but he managed to get all those people out their cells to hear what we had to say, to make sure we could at least leave them with some hope. Because hope's the most important thing when you are in prison, as Carl lovely and delightfully said, and I smiled at the time, which was, sometimes when you're in the worst situation, as long as you know and you have faith and you hope that when you leave this situation, you can overcome it, that might make your situation 10 times better.
Which I thought was extraordinary, because you were talking to people in there, young men who were potentially going to have another 30 years, but still it felt as though the possibility of hope, just that thing of hope, was a big deal. You could see them light up. And then the idea that we might go back, it was just a huge, will you come again?
Absolutely. Hope is everything. You know, once an individual gets to a place of hopelessness, that's where they start contemplating suicide, because you can't see an end. You can't see this ever finishing. You know, so...
Secondly, I'd love to say on that point, that was fantastic you said suicide or violence. Because funny enough, before we came to that prison, HMP Swellside, the prison inspector of the UK, Her Majesty's prison inspector, Peter Clark, who's the #1 man, had deemed that place to be unsafe. So did their governor deem it to be unsafe, and their level of violence was very high.
His nickname was Stabside, right?
Indeed. And in the last 21 months to 18 months since we've been going there, that's dropped. So as you say, when somebody is hopeless, suicide, anger, violence, danger, it's risen. You give people a bit of hope, and all of a sudden, dramatically, things fall. And I think that in itself, especially for people who are going to be watching such a thing, for them to do their own research in that, that's magic.
Yeah.
And that's what I think society wants to see.
Yeah. How did your rehabilitation come about? Carl heard a voice and bang, he was like, today's the day that everything changes. Yeah. Did the same thing happen to you? How did it happen?
Yes and no. I'm very lucky in the sense of a lot of things happen to me where situations arise and I'm able to make a good decision at a crossroad. And I'd say 3 or 4 things have happened to me. A lot of my friends have given life sentences themselves as well. So there was a time when I was 21 and I was at a crossroads where I said, you know what, I can carry on being a gangster, but I'm probably going to end up dead, or I'm going to have to protect myself, and in that act I may take somebody's life. And it's all good and well saying you've protected yourself. You may end up killing somebody's son, and unfortunately you need to go to prison for the rest of your life. Equally, I've been hurt myself, shot, stabbed, and I've had wonderful individuals have come in that time of my life and supported me, where I thought to myself I could get revenge, or maybe I can turn the other cheek. But if I do turn the other cheek, what is there? Finally, I was given opportunities. I was given opportunities by charities who work on the front line with young people, hence why I'm always someone to say invest in the grassroots that we've got now, especially with the violence we've got now in London as a city. But equally, I always knew I could be more than what I was at that day. And what was big for me was I went to give a speech in Chelsea Football Club in 2011. It was, just after the riots, and everyone's quite upset that we had London riots. But me, I looked at it as an expression of young people actually had enough, because what you need to realise was a young black man was shot and murdered by the police, and we wanted to find out the ins and outs about that. Now the inquest has got to the position it has, but at the end of the day, people feel a certain way, and if they don't feel like they're getting what they need to, they will act.
And is that what's happening at the moment? I mean, maybe you can give us an insight. Maybe Carl, just start with you. Just give us an insight into what is happening on the streets of London at the moment with the level of violence that seems to be rising. I think it's the highest it's been since 2008, 121 murders this year. And a lot of our people are involved in it, right? What's going on?
There is. I mean, as you rightly said, there's a real epidemic of stabbings and knife crime. I mean, someone sent a viral video a couple of days ago where there was a guy stabbed and the knife was left in his back, and it was about this big. So it's a real issue at the moment. What's causing it? I just think that there's a bunch of misguided youths running around who have zero value for life. So and the danger is we becoming so desensitized to this level of violence that it's nothing. It doesn't mean anything. It's just another person who's been killed. So what's causing it? If you look back at all the guys that we met in prison, and I do some work in prison as well as in schools, and I speak to these kids who are at risk of going into people referral unit, which has been classified the route to prison, because
tell us about that. How does that happen?
So people referral unit is a scheme where young majority black guys, black kids get kicked out of school permanently, and they go to some sort of club, pretty much a youth club now. That's what it is, where they have to meet certain criteria in their academics.
But it's not there is some education to the.
It's not a lot at all.
It's like it's supposed to be alternative provision.
It's supposed to be. They absolutely do nothing that helps them academically in that way.
And you see it as the door. You would say it's the door. Once you're in there.
Once you're in there.
You're heading off.
Well, unfortunately, there's talk now, isn't there? And there's academic research, and as you've seen on the London Underground, that there is actually a tube line which says the school to prison pipeline. And unfortunately what it is if you get kicked out of mainstream school, you go into people referral units, behavioural schools, alternative provision, or what have you. But what's going on is that kids are being kicked out of school with less than a piece of paper. So they're saying to, they call your mother and say, oh, this kid really needs a transfer out of our school into a different school, and we'll really help him do that. Or you'll get the ones who are not even getting a letter, but they've been kicked out of school never to come back again, but we don't want it on his record. Unfortunately, they're being left out on the street where they're being groomed and exploited at all levels of criminality.
Yeah, Carl, you made a great point, I thought, last week when you were talking to the men, and you were saying that you are the average of your 5
people you're around.
Yeah, what was the point that you were making there?
Absolutely. I mean, if take myself and Noel, for instance, I became the average of the top 5 people I hung around, which were fraudsters. So all we discussed, all we talked about, all we did was engage in fraud. Simple. Now my life is totally different where I'm involved in business. All my friends and associates just talk about business, talk about new ideas of how we can totally revolutionize, the business world and Africa. So, and even
unsurprisingly, you become an average of those five guys.
Absolutely. Environment kills willpower all day of the week and twice on Sundays. You can't think you can be that exceptional one to be in a bad environment and think you're going to stand out.
Yeah. Was that what happened to you, Noel? I mean, you're 13 years old, and again, were you the average of your 5 closest
Equally,
associates?
Definitely, and I think I was that until I was about 22. Until you start to be around different people who function, and as you say, talk different and think different, you're only going to be around what you were around. And for me, which I was very, very lucky with, I was asked what I wanted to be one day, and I said a politician, and I've been stuck on this march ever since. So I'm lucky enough that the 5 average people I'm around nowadays they're all quite different to where I was
your Instagram
before.
Earlier, you were with Mr. Corbyn, I think.
Indeed, Mr. Corbyn, and met Mrs. May, and
the
Queen, and Vince Cable, and all the leaders of these fantastic parties. And obviously, I've worked in policy in the Centre for Social Justice.
Tell us a bit. What are you doing now?
I've worked in policy for last year in the Centre for Social Justice, which is deemed to be the greatest think tank in the world. And I'm very, very lucky to have been there for that year. And a young kid like myself, and they described me as bringing the back streets to the front line of British politics, which I felt was fantastic from the CEO, Andy Cook. He's a really lovely man. And at the moment, I'm starting to set up my own policy institute, where I think it's important that actually there's no policy institute run by any young people who come from my demographic, and I think that's also important.
Tell us, what do you want to
important.
achieve? What do you want to achieve?
Well, I want policy that benefits everybody in the country, and I want everybody to come and work alongside me, whether you're black, white, Jewish, Muslim, it doesn't really matter. But what I really want is to make sure we've got good justice and good social justice and criminal justice policy coming out. At the moment, prisons are in a shambles, and prisons are my passion. I believe that anybody can come out and change their lives. And socially, I think things are a shambles. If you work 3 jobs part-time and you only have £180 at the end to live off, that's a shambles.
You were telling me earlier, brother. Tell me about that.
I was telling you earlier about a woman that I know, and unfortunately she worked 3 jobs, part-time jobs. She has £180 to live off for herself at the end, and that includes her gas, electric, her food, and actually her own living standards. And I want to improve things for people like that. Education, something that helped me open my eyes, and I want to make sure education also is the right thing that we're doing. And when we say education, it's not always about what we're doing at school, but education, as you said to Carl earlier about knife crime. Well, really, the root causes of knife crime sometimes is a lack of education and opportunity. And if more people actually invested in the young people around them, and which what I want to do with this policy institute, we do practice where we go into universities, prisons and schools, and we talk about stuff on the front line, but also policy and writing the policy for these things, and making sure that we also contact the people who are at the grassroots level, the charities and the alliances that are involved in these things, as well as working with other think tanks to get the best result. We can help change the country still, because I don't think that we're at a dead end.
Yeah, I mean, someone has said, and I love this quote, every kid needs an adult who is irrationally crazy about them. Every kid needs an adult who is irrationally crazy about them. I think that's a fantastic thing to think on. Yeah. And most of these guys, I mean, even you, right, you didn't have that adult who was irrationally crazy about them, right?
Absolutely. I'm glad you've brought that on, especially when it comes to young black boys who are out there, killing each other, and what you've just said about having someone crazy enough about them. Who can be more crazy about you than your dad? Than the person who gave birth to you?
Talk to us about that. Let's hear a little bit about that.
So the majority of the problem, I was saying initially, I meet a lot of guys who are in prison currently, and guys you can see the likelihood of where they're going to be. And the common denominator with these guys are absent fathers. That's an epidemic, especially in our community at the moment. And without having someone present to give you the guidance that you need of how to be a man. You don't get taught how to be a man. You grow up to a certain age and society expects you to know how to think, conduct yourself as a man. Yeah. No one teaches this stuff. They don't teach it in school, they don't teach it in churches, they don't teach it in society. Yeah. So how do you expect me to know how to be a man? Yeah. But you hear man up. What does that actually mean? So it's a major issue, and I look back at myself, and I was fortunate to have my dad present, and my mom and dad are still together till today. But my dad is a very quiet man. I can count almost on one hand how many times we've sat down and he's sat me down and said, this is how you do this. This is how you tackle this kind of issue. This is how to be. You know, if I don't go to him to pose those questions, it's not information that he comes and just frees up to me. You know, so I kind of had to go out and learn how to be a man through trial and error. I had more errors than more victories. But those were the reasons why I started making the decisions that I made. I never had anyone to show me the guidelines to say, okay, you don't do this because this are going to be the ramifications.
On this conversation, you help us think through this point.
Listen, I fully agree with Carl. I can't take anything away from him. I just feel that also, it's not really a cop-out. We don't want people, you know, looking at this thinking, oh, well, you know, the black community, they don't have their dads around, so we must all. But it comes down to what you said. I think it's anybody. The best person would be a dad, but then it's anybody, isn't it?
It can be a teacher.
Absolutely. It could be a teacher.
It could have been the lady who basically said, you know what? I'm gonna get involved in Noel.
And the reason why I say that is because I always refer back to Tina Morgan when I was 13, 14 years old learning how to read, because there's a woman that works for the Daily Mail called Amanda Patel. You know, everybody in the nation knows her, and she wrote a piece about Stormzy the other day, and she wrote a piece about the people coming out of prison and reforming themselves, and people say she's quite controversial, but me, I think she's lovely. And the reason why I say that is because I met her a year and a half ago, and that's also somebody that believed in my journey. So it's like you said, it's not just a kid. I think it also goes on to, if you haven't had anybody like this in your life when you're 25, 26, 20, then when you get even now, you're like, well, this is great. People believe in what I'm doing. They want to support my journey. And it almost makes you feel part of something. Whereas young people, what they have now is at 14, 15, 16, oh, a 21-year-old that's telling me, oh, your behavior is great, but your behavior is criminal. So we all want to be part of something. And what I want society to do while they're watching this today is think, oh, actually, if we're 5 adults who've got a Thursday and we're all going down the gym together, how about you bring 10 young people with you? There's a place in Battersea now called Carney's Community doing absolutely fantastic work. Best place in the whole of the country.
What's it called again?
Carney's Community, ran by a man called George Turner. Definitely the best place in the country. And they have, it's in Battersea, by the way. Half of it is very affluent. The other half is estates and people are dying left, right and centre. But the people that are living in the affluent part are now going to the boxing club with young boys who they know are involved in crime, really trying to help them change their lives and getting part of it.
So as a model, this could
That
really...
is a beautiful model socially that I think we can all get behind. Because as I said, we all need role models and we all need heroes.
What I love about Yuri Brofenbrenner's quote, which is one I just gave you about being irrationally crazy about you, is that in a way you're in prison, you're a young black guy, Tina Morgan's a white woman. It's some level irrational, but she's irrational enough to say, I'm going to make sure that this guy learns to read and write. If nothing else, I'm going to make sure.
But you know what, let me just, and I have to impress this on just for a minute. Socially in our country is a big problem right now with things like Brexit throwing up underhand, underseeded racism, Windrush scandal. These times, you know, my grandma's been here for donkeys. Well, I mean, like 70 years. She's been here a long time. And unfortunately, these things stir up an undercurrent.
You think it's happening? You're seeing that now?
Of course, you know, we're seeing it now. We're seeing it getting played out left, right and centre. So for a woman who, you know, especially the Tina Morgan out in Bristol and the Amanda Patel at the Daily Mail, which we all know historically isn't the nicest paper towards the young black lads, and they like to call us yobs and all sorts of horrible names that they throw out. It's important to see that actually we can break social barriers. Unfortunately, something like Grenfell Tower had to happen for people who live in the affluent part of Ladbroke Grove to think, do you know what, we've got blankets and quilts. So in our country, we really do have the beautiful thing of we are multicultural, no matter what colour you are, we will band together. But equally, we've seen far-right extremism rise, and that's a scary business. So for anybody to be crossing them social barriers, whether you're white or black, and women and the young kids, it's a beautiful day. Because also, when I put my tracksuit on after this, when I want to go to the gym, there'll be people crossing the road from me, and all I want to do is go to the gym.
Do you have that? Do you see that?
Oh, I see that all the time.
Really?
And when I get to the gym, they're almost, oh, it's just you. And I said, oh, it was just me that was behind you, but you decided to stop, wait till we got in the gym and then take your hoodie off to say it's just you. I cannot apologise for being black, my love, but what you need to apologise for is your unconscious bias, and maybe slow down from reading all those tabloids and listening to the media, and then just find out that I'm just Noel Williams who's attending the same gym as you and everything's going to be fine.
Can't you find a little bit of that? Is there any? I you look like a guy, like, dude, I'd cross the road. You're a big guy.
Luckily enough for me, I haven't ever encountered anything such as that. Luckily, touch wood. I'm very conscious of how I conduct myself when I'm out. I understand I'm a big, bold, black guy.
You're ripped to the max, man.
I look like Goliath to some people. So I'm conscious of that. So when I'm in certain environments, I make sure, I don't change who I am, but I try to kind of downplay my size. Just smiling. I've got a very big smile, so I smile. I try to be as welcoming as possible because I know what people are thinking, and I just don't want to play into their hands and give them any opportunity to kind of, offend me in any way, shape, or form.
But if you were giving a message to some of the young kids on our streets today, a young version of yourself, basically, a young Carl, a young Noel, who's out there, and they've got the same choices you've got: sport, crime, music. Sport and music isn't going to work for them. They're left with crime. They're getting desensitized. This is happening. The wrong postcodes. 4NF, I think, might be one of them, for example. If you don't want to find yourself in the wrong place, what message? I mean, let's just start with you, Carl, very quickly. But what message of hope do you think you would give? What would you say to them?
I would tell them that they're living in the best time we've ever had in history, where there's so many resources and opportunities available. My kind of take on education is just purely based to teach you how to pass exams to get a job. Now we're living in times where a lot of jobs are becoming obsolete, and what's the point in education these days? You still need education for sure, but what I try to get the younger guys to focus more on is their gift, their purpose. Why are you here?
Why are you on this earth?
Why are you on this earth? What can you do to add value to people that will bring you success and fulfillment? Because they're two different things. Success is very subjective. What's your version of success is totally different to his and to mine. But unfortunately, they deem success as having the nice cars, the nice watches,
And can we break that cycle? Because if it's an easy thing to just...
We can break it by sending that message. So we need to have new ways that we can really prime young people to see that success is just not about the money that you make. Add value. How are you adding value? Business is all about adding value. You add value, you get paid. The money you make is directly proportionate to the value that you're adding. So if you can add value using a gift that you never had to work for, it was given to you free by God, and you can make money by that, that's the ultimate success. So it's really turning the narrative and changing that, what they seem success is into something that you can create something, you can start something. Backed up with where we are in the world right now, where we've got so much technology, people starting up businesses from their bedrooms, from their lofts.
Are you giving the same kind of a message? What's your message?
No, I fully agree with everything that Carl says. I think I'd only just add, we've just got 2 minutes left, so I'll only just add quite quickly that also, I think young people have to be willing to take an opportunity that they are unsure about. When we talk about music and we talk about sport, that's just globally something that black people are socially accepted to do. Why is it we can't think about being a policy advisor or the next...
Which you are now, right?
Indeed, and I'll continue to do so. And I think everywhere I go, talking to journalists and cameramen, there's so much stuff, as Carl says, out there now that really let's broaden our minds and look at different options. And if the option isn't there, then keep searching, because you've got the tools to keep searching and keep believing in yourself. So I'd like to be optimistic enough to actually say, go and look about your mental health as well. I did it. I did 21 months of trauma counselling, and I think I needed it because I'd seen a lot of youth violence in my time myself, and I think that's helped me get to where I am now. So be open, it's allowed to be vulnerable.
How do you do that though? How do you reach out and say, look, I have a problem, I need some help here? Well, it's not something that's not easy to do.
So for anyone that's watching this who's a practitioner or anything, if you've got young people who are at yacht teams or at probations, then go and speak to your yacht worker, go and speak to your probation worker, youth offending team, so the management officer. Go and speak to your doctor. I spoke to my doctor. I know that everybody doesn't want to speak to maybe their parent or what have you, but there's always someone in your life that can speak to somebody, because if you don't speak to somebody, you'll always think you're doing the right thing. I think counsel best in 3 men is always a good thing. So my message is just for them to try and change the way they think, be optimistic, but be open as well with where they are at and where they want to go.
And just on that topic of mental health, I think we also need to make it, because this is a topic that's very close to me. I lost my brother to suicide last year, which is still hasn't sunk in all honesty. We need to make it okay for people to come out and speak about it. We need to give them a platform to make it okay, because especially coming from an African background, mental health, that term mental health doesn't exist in Africa. You just either sort yourself out, get yourself out of whatever depression that you're in. So it's really making it okay, especially for black men, to come out and talk about their struggles, because it's tough being a man. It's really hard being a man, dealing with, you know, how much money you need to make, you know, wife and kids and society and all the pressures. So we need to know how to vent, you know, in either through exercise or whatever your system is for you to just release some of that tension, you know, and usually it's by talking to someone. You know, because we keep all of that tension in for so long, and we get to a point where we just implode, you know, and it manifests itself in so many different ways, especially someone who's struggling to either get a job or start up a business and things are not going according to plan. And like I said earlier on, you lose that hopelessness, and the only thing that you can ponder on is taking your own life, which is exactly what my brother did. He was in depression for 10 years, a whole decade of just sitting in his flat, isolating himself, not speaking to anyone. And I got a phone call on a Sunday morning from my mom saying, you know, he's made that ultimate choice. You know, so I can just only bear to imagine how many guys are out there that are in the same position who feel like they can't talk to anyone because it's frowned upon to say, I'm struggling with something. You know, so we definitely need to give people a platform or change narrative that it is okay to talk about what's happening internally with you and ask for help. Because a lot of guys don't do that.
Yeah. Noel, Carl, what a privilege it's been to talk to you.
Thank you. Honours
Thank
all
you so
mine.
much
Thank you very much.
for coming in and helping us to have a really big conversation.
Yeah.
This is one of the biggest issues of our time.
It is.
Thank you so much for watching us. This has been Talk About Black. We're talking about what it means to be black in 2018 and in the years to come. And we're going to put some information up at the end of this. If you've been affected by anything that you've heard, well, we're going to put some details of numbers you can call and websites you can visit. So thank you very much, and we'll be back once more to Talk About Black. Thank you.